Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vellic and Mimicry Tabletop Role-Playing Podcast. I'm Vellic. This is Brand.
Hello.
And you have just experienced the wonder that is our intro video. I never get tired of it.
Oh,
It's awesome every time.
neither do I. It's a nice little tune.
I want fruit by the foot. God, I haven't had that in a long time.
They still make that?
It's like Gushers. I think of it randomly. I'm like, oh yeah, those are amazing. Maybe I just like things that explode in my mouth.
Well,
Anywho,
we know all about that.
do we? But anywho, welcome to episode 20 of Mass and Mimicry. We've now officially done this for 20 whole times.
Wow.
It's been a bit. We continue to talk every other Wednesday about tabletop role-playing and adjacent topics within tabletop. Oh god, yeah, the sushi gusher. Yeah, I do remember that. That was an adventure, just like tabletop role-playing. You're not getting me off topic. I'm here. Today we're going to talk about what to do, or what we do rather, with absent players. What we do dealing with when, well, one of your key players is gone from the tabletop, which is relevant, I guess, for everyone, because I don't know of anyone who doesn't have scheduling issues. And then you have kind of, I guess, the first issue that comes up, the first question, which is, are you even going to meet when you're missing somebody?
Yeah, that is the question. And I think perhaps even like a meme of D&D or tabletop in general is you schedule it, everyone says yes, 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 yes. Suddenly, day of, text, can't be there. And then it falls apart and doesn't happen.
Yeah,
you see that a lot.
Everybody's first wish, you know, if I could wish for anything, people, a gaming schedule that works.
Yeah. So I consider our groups to be actually perhaps on the luckier side in that we still regularly play despite people being unavailable from week to week. Because it kind of seems that's not the norm.
Yeah, it does seem like a number of people will cancel their game sessions if people are missing. And we do, depending. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to get into is, so what are those conditions? How do you evaluate that? What considerations do you look at? Because we don't normally cancel too often.
No.
If I could summon a demon in their place, I absolutely would sometimes.
Temporarily turn them into a demon.
But a lot of what I look at for considerations for whether or not to cancel, because it is always a thought, you know, as soon as somebody drops out from a session, it's like, I can't make it, whether they tell you a minute ahead of time or 2 days ahead of time, is, you know, okay, are we going to cancel, or can I do this without that person? One of the main things is content. Immediately looking at what I have planned, and is it going to be a problem for that person not to be there? And I think there's a couple different reasons or ways that can be. One, you know, if you've balanced fights for the group with that person there, that brings up some considerations. But also, like, is it relevant to that player character?
That's probably the bigger of the two there, is how story relevant is it to that character? Are they going to miss out on something that they really don't want to?
Yeah, because that is a major concern. You know, if it's something's going to happen that's really relevant to their character, and the player's going to really want to be there, or in some cases, something that you, the storyteller, want the player to really be there for, and they may not even know it's coming, but you're like, I want to have the thing. For instance, you know, we had in our D&D game that I was running, we had this upcoming event for a long time, the Battle of the Bards.
Yes.
And one of our player characters is a bard, and the event may or may not have been added explicitly for them to get to do some barding. Bardening. I don't know.
Bard. I like bardening. That sounds.
Why not?
Prepare for the bardening.
And then when we finally got up to it, they'd known about it for like probably 4 months of real world time, but like, a certain amount of in-game time. They finally got to do it, and then it was looking like the player wasn't going to be able to make it when we were like impending like the day before, and I'm sitting there like, how do I delay? Because there's almost no point in having this event without the character there.
Yeah.
They fortunately ended up being there, but I was just sitting there like, how do I delay the event? Like, if can I interject something to just derail everybody to something else entirely for a session if they can't be there?
Yeah, that was a difficult one because it was, I imagine, just super time critical. In a lot of cases, that's not that way. You have more flexibility, but that was, this is happening. This is how many days have passed in game. I've already set the date for this in a newspaper weeks ago. This is happening one way or the other. How do I not make it happen now? That's rough.
Yeah, unfortunately, it worked out. Player was able to be there and everything. He pulled through, got to do the event. But that's a huge consideration when someone's not going to be there. It's what type of content do you have planned? And I think, what substitute content do you have available? For instance, in that case, I was like, what can I do to derail the party? If he can't be there, is there something I can do to keep the party busy for a half a day in-game time? Because that's basically what they've got. What can I interject to basically like, no, we're not progressing?
Yeah, and a lot of times those types of moments or last-minute thinking, those things you come up with tend to take you out of the story and becomes its own self-contained moment that those players involved will remember, but largely is not even impactful to anything going on.
Yeah, and I think they can be problematic because they can be less than great. And I think if you're going to do that, especially if you have to do it last minute, you really have to just throw in some substitute content. Go big or go home. Like, just dispel disbelief, or suspend disbelief. Go for something, because you're gonna have to probably manhandle it a little bit. You're gonna have to kind of shove it in there and make it happen. So you might as well make it something really cool and crazy. So just go big, make some crazy stuff happen. Like literally, giant minotaur just starts attacking the city. I don't mean a big minotaur. I mean like a building-sized minotaur starts attacking the city, and they have to deal with that randomly. And it's weird and random, but they have no choice really, but to deal with it. And it's going to be cool, because if you throw in something that maybe fits better, but isn't as flamboyant, I feel like you run the risk of just having a weird random thing that happens. And then they're
if you're
like,
not moving forward,
that was kind of a waste of session.
Yeah, exactly. So try to move forward with it if you can, and if not, like you said, go big or go home in a very non-forward way. Just a momentary blip of space of awesomeness. Yeah.
Now, if you can build in social content of some sort, that I think is the ideal. If they can, have some kind of a social challenge of some sort, some kind of espionage or intrigue, some new enemy they have to investigate, or some kind of new challenge to find out about. That can be really good for padding some of that time while still perhaps moving some things forward. Because then you also don't have to worry so much about like the combat complications. Like, I balanced a bunch of fights and stuff for 4 people, and now I have 3 people. You can adjust the difficulty, or you could slap them into some different types of challenges.
Yeah. I won't go into what I was planning. Most recently, we had in my campaign a player iffy, whether he was or wasn't going to be there, and I had to come up with a plan B in case he wasn't, because I already had another player who for sure wasn't, and I was like, we got to play. Like, we missed the last week already because I took a break off. We're playing. I need a plan B, and that plan B, I really sat down and thought about, okay, these are the people present. Conveniently, the 2 people who wouldn't be there weren't locally centered around where we finished the week prior. They were a little ways off. Let's utilize that and try to bring, your character and a few other characters who were there where we ended into a new thing going on. I didn't have to do that, thankfully, but
yeah, you can always, depending on the setting, finagle some weird magic stuff. If you really have to, go and grab people and randomly teleport them somewhere, or and I do feel like players are generally forgiving of something janky that you might do like that, given certain circumstances. Like a player's missing, I think players are a lot more forgiving of a random side quest when, somebody didn't make it at last minute and you just had to go, you're doing this.
Yeah, and that's something I think we talked about last session. What some of the things we like a lot about D&D, and one of my favorites was the setting is so flexible to be able to do what you want, and magic in particular is a scapegoat. A lot of times it's your get out of jail free card when you need it most to explain something that doesn't make sense.
It's old magic.
Yeah. When in doubt, if you're missing a player and you don't know what to do, magic is the answer.
I had another thought while thinking about this for kind of substitute content, for if you need to interject something. What if the missing player / character, and this isn't necessarily always work, but what if they are the content? You wake up one morning from whatever you were doing and whatever you were planning to do, and that character is missing. They have gone AWOL.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone's just like, where's Ted?
I've done that, yeah.
And then you just spend the whole session going, well, do we do what we were going to do without him, or do we go looking for him? There's
you
a
find
ransom
clues
note
of him using the restroom in the middle of the night. Clearly, he's been stolen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
I've done that. I specifically did that.
I remember that, yeah.
And that works okay. And if you can have time to think about it on how to maybe not progress or forward the current story, add things that make sense to the overall story later.
Could be related.
You guys found some map related things in there that become interesting tidbits for you should you wish to investigate those locations or something.
Yeah, could be related to the character's backstory. Could be some weird magic stuff that happens.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Short of that, if the story is irrelevant to missing player count, I think, is my focus at that point. If we have 5 people in our group, 2 people are missing, we've got 3 people, I'm okay with that. It's not ideal. If we have 4 people and only 1 person's missing, I'm also okay with that. But if half the group is missing, I'm probably not running it.
Yeah. When you and I have just talked about that before, because I have a similar policy. My game has 5 people. If 2 people are missing, I heavily consider canceling. If it's just 1 person out of 5, we're meeting no matter what, unless we were seriously doing something very related to them and there's no way out of it. We're meeting. But if 2 people out of 5 are missing, I start to really weigh on it and go, is there, what are we doing? Now, if we're doing something that's not really story relevant or or at least not like super important, we're doing traveling and maybe some combat encounters. We're not like about to hit the crux of the story. We're still going to go forward. But if we're hitting something that's really like a climactic moment or something in the story or relevant to backstories and things, I really start thinking, even with just 2 out of 5 people gone, I don't know if I want to do it. We haven't really had that because with D&D, how often do those moments come up? That's like 1 in 10 sessions. Most of them
you
are
throw them in,
wading through a dungeon, or
you sprinkle them throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
And I think maybe one of the key elements of making that decision, or whether you're weighing one way or the other, is knowing that taking time off from D&D can spiral to a campaign closure. and you want to play as frequently as possible to stay in that groove and keep going. Otherwise, at some point, if you take a week off and then something else happens next week, you have to take that week off, and something else. It just spirals. It can spiral to a campaign's done moment.
Yeah, just like losing players.
Yeah.
With my campaign of 5 people, which is now 4 people. At least in 2 weeks it will be. So relevant topic. Dealing with someone leaving completely. And I guess I'll get into that in a minute. Because my last consideration that I wanted to add before I completely change topic is forewarning. My last consideration for whether or not you even meet at all is forewarning. Did the person tell me 2 days ago, or did they tell me an hour before the session that they're not going to be there? And then that becomes a major factor for me because, one, I really hate last minute changes. But it depends on what's coming up. I'm like, can I adjust the stuff we have planned for the session? But it actually tends to work in reverse with the number of players. Like, normally, like I said, if we're missing 2 out of 5 people, I'll consider canceling. But if one of the people canceled like last minute, I'm inclined to go without them. One, because they canceled last minute on us, so they get to miss content. But 2, then I have to change my schedule last minute if I cancel, which I really don't like doing.
Yeah, and typically by then, depending on who you are as a prep person, you've probably done a decent amount of work. Getting to play day.
Already prepped everything.
You don't want to make that worthless.
But that does bring up an interesting sort of absence, though. The person not just absent, but leaving the game. Someone having a permanent scheduling conflict or whatever the case may be, and withdrawing out of the game, and how you adapt to that. And I can say it depends on the game.
Yeah.
It depends on the character. In this case, the character is our primary healer, which in D&D is a problem. Now, there are fortunately ways around it. Most likely, the player characters are going to have some availability of alternative healing methods in some capacity, whether it's by, easier access to potions that they can possibly have, or some magical items to help do some healing. It's that aspect of things is manageable. It's just up to me to figure out what the easiest and best way to accommodate that without breaking the group dynamic and the roles. There's probably going to be a wand of cure wounds somewhere or something,
I might have to start using more healing. I'm the off healer of the group.
You've got 2.
I've got a few healing capabilities, but
you have 2 off healers, sort of. So
yeah, but yeah, that's always difficult, and then as a DM, you're always trying to weigh in. Do I kill him? Do I put him aside in case availability changes and he wants back in, etc., etc.? And I'm personally kind of leaning towards the second of those. I try to give some room in case, and then when it's very clear that it's just not at all the thing, if there's a way to just axe the character, I will. But
I usually ask what the player wants, because this happened in my last game too. About halfway through, one of the players said they weren't going to be able to make it anymore, and they specifically wanted me to kill their character off. They were like, "That's what I want. I want you to kill my character, murder him." And I tried, but I don't like to force things. I don't like to ram things through unless I have a really good idea of how to do it. And the player was leaving when you were like in the middle of a dungeon. I already had all planned out and everything. About to start leaving the dungeon, and it wasn't like super conducive or easy, but I gave it a good try, like 2 different fights trying to kill that character, and your entire group was extremely determined for that character to not die.
Yep, me in particular. But that was my thing. Like I protect everyone. And
Yeah, and so,
so
I mean, it worked out though, fortunately, because after about
he,
a month or so,
he
the
came
player
back.
came back.
Yeah,
But
convenient.
that's usually what I would do. So usually I'd ask, like, hey, do you have any ideas for what happens to your character, and or any preferences at least on whether they just kind of go somewhere, do they get killed?
Yeah,
What do
that's
you
a fair
want?
question. It is their character after all. They spent the time to make it and to play it, and I mean, they might still really want to be there and be invested, and they just can't for a reason. And giving them that opportunity to decide its fate
Yeah.
is a good way to go.
And I tend to always prefer for them to be alive, because you don't know what's going to happen. The player may try to come back. They may be able to come back for cameos. Maybe they
Mhm.
show up as a surprise guest in a game, and you pull them in, and they show up as like an NPC or something, either being played by that person or played by the storyteller, or whatever the case may be. But I always kind of put it up to the player. But really, my main concern is what's best for the remaining players.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm a little reluctant to just like absolutely force something in. Like I said, I asked player in the last game, and they wanted me to kill their character. I tried to do it, but I wasn't willing to break the immersion and the gameplay in order to force it to happen.
You
Because
just
what I'm
gotta,
mainly concerned about is the remaining players and how is their experience. You've
yeah,
left, so I'm not that worried about you. I want to respect what you want to happen to your character, but I'm not that
yeah.
concerned about you because you've left.
Ideally, if you can, maybe try to tie it in. There's no guarantee at that point when you're uh, even as a forceful hand of DM godness. Um, you can maybe try to tie it into other characters to give them some development from a moment of leaving, whether it's walking off into the sunset or dying. Um, Try to make it impactful enough that it sparks other character development from the remaining characters somehow.
Yeah. So moving, I think, on from that. One of the things that is a consideration that we haven't gone into yet is if the player's gone, that doesn't necessarily mean the character has to be gone. And there is
Correct.
the question of who perhaps plays the character. Do you, as the storyteller, play the character, or do you get another player to play the character?
Yeah. In my case, we have Sarah here in chat actually, who oftentimes volunteers to play her brother in my campaign whenever he's missing. I will role play the situation, but she will make all the sheet rolls so that I can focus entirely on the story. Um, and that frees me up.
Yeah.
The less sheet looking I'm doing, the better. The less rolling and which sheet is it? I have the DM, especially on Roll20, has so many things either open or on the sidebar. It's hard to find the time to sift through it all to make one roll for someone else. So having that is great, and I just role play. I backside the character though. Even then, I won't expressively role play the character. If questions are asked that come his way, I'll answer in very short and just kind of go with the flow, yes or no kind of things. And even for instance, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Not the last time we played, but the time before that, we got into a point where that character or that player was missing, and he had ended the previous session being in control of an item and kind of voicing points towards solving a puzzle. And I made a mention to Sarah and you guys, like, he was kind of leading this moment. He's not here. You guys need to figure out what you're doing now. I will, happily have him still hold this item and go around and follow your guys' direction. But you guys are in charge of this now.
Well, and I think that's kind of the best option because the most frustrating, and it depends on the game, really, I should say that. But for like D&D, I think that's the best option because it's really frustrating as a DM to have to play other people's characters and tons of NPCs and stuff for battles and roll from their sheet and make all their character choices and everything while also juggling a ton of enemies and all kinds of stuff, sitting there with like 13 tabs open on your computer, or 10 different character sheets in front of you if you're at a table. It gets really frustrating really quickly.
Mhm.
So having someone to at least roll for the character and choose their combat actions and stuff is really helpful. And then I similarly try to avoid role-playing that person too much. I've noted that players like to mess with you when you're playing someone
I was
else's
so going to
character.
bring that up, yeah.
And to be like,
So, what do you think?
Yeah, what do you think? And you're just like, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Especially with our group, when a number of us do character voices and stuff, and then I'm sitting there like, great, you want me to try to voice Shepard.
Yeah.
Which I have no practice doing, all right?
Yeah. On the note of like combat in that regard, I think the DM largely knows the player characters better than other characters who aren't that character. So if you're missing someone, the DM is perhaps the most qualified to play that character because you work with them a lot and talk behind the scenes a lot. Yeah. So in those situations, if like Sarah goes to make a combat action for the player or her brother's character in this case, I might look at that and be like, depending on the situation, normally I'll just go with it, but sometimes might be like, he would not do that, or he would do this instead in this particular moment. And usually those moments are very specific that he the missing player, has already told me I prioritize these things.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you get that you have to take into consideration from what you know of what she may want as a player, or some other considerations though for who plays the character altogether. I think besides just what we generally do, I think a lot of it comes down to comfort level. Whether someone else is comfortable playing their character. I'm not necessarily as a DM comfortable playing other people's characters because I don't always know what they want to do, but also I don't want to be responsible for them dying or something in combat, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah. Or other mistakes that you make choices for their character and it comes back later being like, well, that was maybe not the best choice
you
I
don't
should have made for them.
Make too many choices for them and stuff. But also depends on what's going on and things like character sheet info. Do they have information on their character sheet that other players really shouldn't see? And so you then, in that case, because that's come up for us, and then in that case, the DM really has to run them because they have stuff on their character sheet that isn't revealed yet or whatever. And, people don't know that character is a changeling. And so
right.
if they control their character sheet, they're going to find out real fast.
Yeah. And when it comes to combat, especially like classes, when you're looking at D&D at least, are so different. And if you've never really played the class and you're jumping into controlling someone else's character, you're looking at their sheet like it's partially a foreign language. It's like, what does any of this do? I know my stuff. I don't know any of this stuff. And so in my case, I've now written out like an action economy sheet. Like, these are all of this person's bonus actions. These are all of this person's regular actions in combat, or these are spells, blah, 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 reactions and items, and just easy to process, hopefully, what you can do in a specific turn.
Yeah, and I think in tactical tabletop games, or more tactical tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons and similar games, there's often a bit of pressure to figure out to not get rid of that character, to not dismiss them from the game entirely, but to, even if the player's gone, to keep that character there somehow, unless you're going to rebalance the fights and battles and everything to do without them. In other games, I would say it's very much the opposite. I would, for instance, in like Vampire or Call of Cthulhu, I would actually be very reluctant to have someone else play a missing player's character. For one, for Vampire, because it's so character driven and so kind of acting and role play
super
focused.
Social.
Yeah. I wouldn't I wouldn't feel as comfortable unless two people were very comfortable with it. I wouldn't feel as comfortable having someone play someone else's character. And then for like Call of Cthulhu, that's not as much of an issue as much as the imminent likelihood of character death.
Yeah, you can make one bad choice and
then their character is dead, and now you're kind of at fault for it. So I would be reluctant to do that in Call of Cthulhu. I'd be much more inclined to find a way to do without them and just omit them from that session, which does, I think, segue very nicely to the question of what you do if a missing player's character might die in a game or have some similar very bad thing happen to them because of how someone else controlled them.
First and foremost, I don't think you can plan for that.
Oh no, there's no good answer.
Maybe a few times you know that there's a possibility that you're in that situation, and if that's the case, going into a session, you might want to just say no session, because nothing good will come from the DM or another player killing a player who wasn't there. I don't think.
Yeah.
There will be out of character, what the F, moments.
Yeah, even if it's kind of understandable, there was nothing to do about it. It's still also like, the likelihood of someone being bitter about it is kind of high.
So, I have an example. This just happened to me as well. Player wasn't there. Combat was happening. Some things had happened earlier. Either that player or I think it was one of the other players threw a guy into lava. And you were starting to whittle down the enemies until there was a few left, and one of them was like, I'm running at this point. Heck no. The missing player was in the path of escape. It just happened to be that, and is like, I'm not fighting, I'm running, I'm pushing you out of the way. The only way to go if you're being pushed is into the lava, and that is not a good thing to fall into, in D&D especially. No. There are a lot of dice involved in
especially
damage.
Not at our level. That's basic instant death.
I made the roll. Like I didn't make the roll. I specifically asked another player to make the roll. And I made two rolls. One first just for the shove, because that's needed. A second one to see if there was a way to not fall in the lava. Given the map there was actually a way for that to not happen, and he succeeded the roll, thankfully. I probably, and I will admit this because I probably don't want him to die, would have found a way for him to take a lot of damage but not die. Instead of just directly falling into the lava, you make him hurt to the point where he's kind of out of it and no longer part of the fight. But don't kill him.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I would generally avoid killing off a character while the player's not there, if at all possible. And this is something that, really you can do with any player character. In most situations, if you have a party wipe, for instance, I don't necessarily condone having a party wipe and then excusing it or anything, but in some cases you can go like, okay, there are reasons you can come up with why the party doesn't die. You can be like, well, they take you prisoner, they knocked you out, they stabilize you and drag you off or something. You can. In D&D, you can, as the DM, fudge their death saving throws and decide that they stabilize at 0. Now, if something else were to happen that's out of your control and someone goes over and kills them, there's nothing you can do about that. One of the other they're unconscious, they're stable at 0, and you've kind of fudged it a little bit and been like, all right, they're unconscious, but they're okay. And then someone else throws a fluffernutter into the room and just blows up half the room. Well, they're dead now.
Sorry, Caduceus.
You can just go, well, okay, I tried, but they literally threw a bomb on your body. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes you just can't avoid it. You do your best to make a point. Hey, you fell, your feet or your hand grazed lava, and you're missing a limb now. You're going to have to deal with that. You weren't there for it. I'm sorry. You didn't die. Be thankful.
I saved you. I took your foot.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we'll be able to deal with that, but just carry the foot. You're carrying the foot around right now. Yeah. You get it healed. It's just gonna take a bit or something. But yeah, I would generally try to avoid. I'd knock them unconscious. Maybe give them some other lingering penalty or ailment or issue that they have to deal with. But I would try to avoid killing them if at all possible. So we are pushing towards the last leg of here, and I have at least 2 more things I kind of wanted to talk about.
Let's spend some time on them then.
The main one here is, once again, if you do, on converse side of that, if you do want to get rid of the character, you don't want them involved in the session without the player, what kind of outs can you build in to take someone's character out of play briefly?
I'm going to come back to magic again, but this is
magic.
Real. This isn't like DM magic. This is player NPC-driven magic. Like, the spells exist. Any player can get them if they're high enough level. Mm-hmm. Have a higher level player or NPC who maybe is already involved in the story, or you have yet to introduce and are planning to, or an agent of a deity, you get involved and magic them away with more feasible magic. I've done this in one of our very, 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 I think it was session number 4 in our campaign, around there. I removed a missing player via a dimension door and utilized it in that moment as a push, a mental push or nudge towards one of the other players, Sarah in this case, who's here, as the sister to this player or this character, and kind of refocusing his absence on how she would deal with it rather than his absence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's definitely something you do. Throw in magic and randomly pull someone away. As we kind of mentioned earlier. One thing that I thought of while thinking about this question was something that I've never done, but amusingly is very viable in almost every situation. Just make the character sick. Like, it never occurred to me till today, but yeah, they wake up and they have the flu.
Yeah.
You're like, well, they could come with you and have disadvantage on all of their checks. Or you could leave them behind because they're not well. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that a lot, but like as a one-off thing, like, that's pretty viable. Like, now they come to think of it, player characters never get sick.
No. Or if you're like mid-dungeon and, it's not that you're waking up in the morning, they turn around and watch the missing players now has a handful of mushrooms, and he's just shoving. He's like, hey, guys, there's his mushrooms. And suddenly he's sick. And
suddenly just barfs everywhere and then passes out. And they're like,
don't eat the mushrooms.
Viable. Or an enemy does something that knocks them out.
Yeah.
That's possible too. Basically some type of unwellness that takes them out of the commission for a day or however long.
You could also have them walk away, like, depending on the situation. If you're in town, if it's somewhat of a downtime shopping episode or unintentionally a planning episode, because you never plan a full episode to be a planning episode, you can have someone just walk away and go do something, and I'll be back later, guys. Figure this out.
You can also, depending on what's going on, you can have reasons for them to intentionally walk away. If the characters recently had some issues, like an argument or something, the character could literally decide, I need some me time. I don't want to deal with you all right now, and just leave and be like, I'll be back later. And they just wander off, and everybody else is like, well, what the hell are you doing? What's their problem? They could have family issues. If assuming the player hasn't killed off all their family, they could have some kind of family issue that comes up. I mean, there is a lot of mundane stuff that you don't normally include in D&D that are real life problems that suddenly and inextricably pull somebody out of whatever they're doing, work or whatever, that we never include in tabletop games.
Yeah. Just take all the common work excuses for not showing up and just throw those in,
Maybe put a fantasy twist on it. Oh no, my mother has dragon pox. And some of those could be viable. and there could be other background related issues and reasons. Some nefarious enemy from their background might come up and to nail a letter to their door telling them to meet them in private, and they ran off to go have a meeting with them and told no one. And
well, you were all here for that, though.
I know. I'm just saying it could have been a good
Yeah.
excuse to get rid of someone for some
Yeah.
get them out of a session. Another thing is literally just building in some kind of a random side conflict. Some kind of enemy or something else that's not background related or only tangentially related that has some beef with that character or something and causes their extrication for a brief time.
Maybe going back to like a dungeon setting, maybe you're looting things and your missing player loots a body, finds a magic item, and it causes something to go very wrong. And so part of the session is the other people trying to figure out what does this magic item do and how do we get this undone.
They find a magical snow globe that they play with while no one else is there, and it teleports only them somewhere else.
Oops.
Whoopsies. I would never throw in magical snow globes anywhere. Like I mentioned before, their absence could also be the entire session. Like, you could have them go missing, and that be the plot of the entire session of figuring out what the hell happened to them, and to rescue them, like much as you have done.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to do it.
And I'm sure there's a lot of other outs. Those are the ones that I had in here.
Yeah. And you don't really, I don't think, have to overthink it either. It's like most players will continue their belief of the situation largely outside of that one aspect, and it's probably not going to ruin it for most people.
They'll excuse how weird it is. You know, there might be an eye roll or something like, but most players are not gonna cause a stink over you having to do something to get rid of another player's character or something. They're gonna go with it, and if they don't, I don't know that you should be playing with them because they're pricks.
And we'll usually, like, let's say that player is a main social person in a group. A lot of times,
that's a nightmare.
Rolls up. We'll totally like look back like, Soparlo, you want to do this? No, I guess we're doing this. Okay. And we'll step up to the plate, and it's just what it is.
Yeah, that is sometimes a nightmare though, when like the main face of the group is gone, and you're like, all right, it's time for all the other characters to do the social stuff. Can be a problem.
Can.
So the last thing I had that I wanted to talk about anyway was how to progress forward with a player missing. How to move the story along if you decide that that's what you want to do. How to make sure their character is played correctly if the character is not omitted.
Yeah. I think part of that is, first, are you playing? If so, okay, the session still continues and you keep moving forward. And there's usually a lot of crossover with some skills, like maybe not always, maybe only one person in the group has Thieves' Tools and is really good at it. And in my group, 3 of you, I think, have Thieves' Tools. 2 of you are good at it. And so you maybe start tuning your session slightly differently to affect more of the remaining people, rather than, if you have a lockbox, well, no one else is going to get through that except the missing player. Maybe let's just not have that box locked. That kind of thing. And you keep progressing. You play the normal session, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you can't, in which case you maybe do foreshadowing sessions. Like you have a side session that links to something that might be happening in the future, or gives clues about what's been happening that you still don't quite know, and it becomes a learning session about the overall objective of things. But you can still have those other elements. You can still have combat, investigation, things, clues.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's a lot of little things you can do to take something you already have and adjust it for the skills of the remaining player characters, so that the one that's absent doesn't have to be relied on to do everything. And I think, we kind of addressed playing them correctly earlier, in that I don't think they will be played correctly. You just kind of accept that they're not going to be, even if the storyteller is the one playing them. Your bandwidth is too limited. You've got too many other things to do. You're going to be focusing on other stuff, not playing that missing person's character, and that's okay. In fact, it's probably better.
It is, especially in our case. There's an NPC in your group right now who is around, and I'm already actively thinking about that. And it's now the player's not there. Okay, I'll keep that relevant in my head somewhere. But my focus is this other NPC who I can utilize a little more accurately because it's an NPC.
Yeah. You've made them. You know how they work, how they do. So moving forward, with your story content and stuff, as we mentioned earlier, if you're going into something really major, that's when I really start thinking about either not having the session or interjecting something to stop it. But if you want to progress the story along some, I agree that you can adjust the content some, and I guess one of the things that's important to me is to make sure that the person who missed the content still finds out what happened. They still have a good idea. So, I won't rely on the other players to tell them what happened. I will send them the write-up. Sometimes I forget till the day before, but the next session. But I try to remember and go send them my own synopsis and wrap-up of everything that happened.
For sure. I start each session with a written write-up for memory's sake for myself and for you guys as well. That is probably more detailed than it should be, but my write-ups to people who have missed are twice as long and twice as detailed. I go through every little moment. I try to, at least, that I remember, and just make sure they understand the things that happened.
Yeah, I won't go through every detail, but I will go through every detail that I think is relevant to that character. Yeah. In fact, sometimes it may include some things that the other player characters didn't see or experience, because I'm like, no, this is related to your character. You would have done or known about this, so on and so forth. That's not too common, but it's happened before. And there's even been at least one case where I interjected something for a character that was missing that was very relevant to their character, but the players didn't really do. For instance, you all stopped at a town that had animal, had a menagerie, an animal menagerie, a little bit of a carnival going on, and everyone was like, "No, we are not going to that menagerie." In fact, you were all all your characters were very much like, "No, we are not going. We're not doing it." And I'm just like, "Fine. Don't go."
Really wanted to.
I was teasing stuff from it too, don't you want to go to the menagerie? And two of the characters even went and looked at it. And we're looking at it and examining it, and now we're leaving. And I was like, but I put a lot of stuff in there specifically for the druid, who needs to have seen certain animals and stuff to be able to turn into them, and so I messaged him outside of it, and I was like, I had decided that night while your characters were all everybody pretty much went to bed early or whatever, and so I was like, his character's gonna go check out the menagerie while everybody's sleeping. He doesn't have to sleep as long anyway, so go and do that. And I told him afterwards, I was like, your character went. This is what they saw at the place. They saw this and this and this and this. These are the animals that were there. These were the different exhibits and events that were there, so on and so forth, and basically gave them this whole write-up of this menagerie, in part because one of the reasons I'd put it in there was because I wanted them to have a list of animals, some exotic, some otherwise not, that they could wild shape into as a
Yeah,
druid.
that's part of a key feature for a druid.
Yeah, and so I was kind of keenly aware that I didn't want to. It can be frustrating sometimes, like as a player with those abilities, to be like, what can I turn into? And then having to work that out with the DM, or being like, have I ever seen a giant bear? And
Yeah.
logically, sometimes that doesn't make sense. Like, where would you, if you had seen a giant bear, you'd probably be dead. And so I was like, all right, here's what's in there. Here's what you've seen, because I kind of wanted it in there so you'd have like a handy list of things that you could easily not. It wasn't like exclusive. Like, these are the only things you can turn into. But I was like, here's a list that you could say, all right, I've definitely seen these things, and then anything outside of that we can work out.
Yeah, I've had whole conversations with a missing player, not during a session, but after the fact, without like any back and forth. Or it was like, you missed a session. It was going to be a moment, for a player and their father to talk after kind of rekindling. And as much as I wanted that to be a more personal thing, I needed the story to keep going after that. So I sat down and wrote out, like, you guys talk for a while. These are all the points you talk about. These are the things he says. These are main elements to your story that you are now learning. And I went point by point by point to recount the things he needed to know about why her situation in this case, character's a she, player's a he, why her situation was the way it was. And yeah, sometimes you just have to do that.
Yeah.
You have to push forward. You want to have those moments. You can't always, but you can go back and make sure they get what they need from it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's my list. Did you have any other
No,
things burning
that
around
was
in there?
an exhaustive list. Yeah,
Yeah. It's a tough thing all around.
it is.
Dealing with somebody missing, because you want everyone to be there. You want everyone to be having fun. You want everyone to experience and enjoy the story that you've crafted, and or crafted with them. And it can be frustrating when somebody's out, both for yourself and for the other players. But
I do have one thing, actually.
go for it.
Not a topic of like questioning, just more of a note, and it just comes from experience, I think, because I've done it myself. I've made the mistake of having a missing player, making a choice for why he wasn't there, and having that choice very much backfire in the group scheme of things, between the social element of the group itself, and it's sometimes you can't do it, and you have to make a choice where you don't get the opportunity to talk to the player, like, what would you do in this moment? Due to, whatever reason, communications aren't available. If that's the case, don't make a choice. Just sit them, sideline them as a background character. Don't make choices for your players unless they tell you this is what they would do.
Now I want to know what it was.
Specifically, I'm referring to our werewolf campaign. One of our wolves was like a news investigator, and I felt like that would be a good time for him to go out and check in on some things because he was missing. And he didn't say that he was doing that. I didn't have the foresight, I should say, to tell our alpha, Sarah, that he was going to do this, and it created a big ol' in character stink. And I know that the player himself felt a little miffed by it. So, but you learn from it. You have to make the mistakes to learn not to do them.
Yeah, for sure. That is that is the sort of thing you have to own up to and be like, oh yeah, that was actually my bad.
Yeah, and I forever kept telling him that was on me. I'm so sorry that you're dealing in this social situation now. My bad.
Yeah, there are, I think, occasions for rewinds in some ways where it can be like, oh, actually, maybe you should strike that from your in-character record because that's my bad. That's my fault, not them.
But that's the tip: is talk with your players before you make a choice in their absence, or just don't make a choice in their absence.
And I would maybe add to that, like, if you're going to do something with the character, with someone's character while they're absent, don't. And it kind of goes hand in hand with this a little bit. Don't punish them for it. Don't add repercussions to that. That is something that you chose, and you're just essentially punishing them now because they couldn't make the session. And there's a little bit of vagarity to that because, again, if it's a situation where like they might die, but you decide instead that they get maimed until they can get healed from it or something, well, that's a little bit different. But
that's a blessing, not a punishment.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was merciful. But yeah, just a thing to bear in mind. Try to. As we mentioned earlier, I definitely avoid killing someone if they're not there. If I can.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's pretty much it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for hanging out. As a reminder, if you're watching this recording later, don't forget to comment. Let us know what you do to deal with player absence, or what kind of things you've struggled against. Might need some input or advice on with regards to that. And of course, like the video. We also have other content. I have other content coming up. Friday, I will be resuming my Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic stream at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And Sunday, I will be playing Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic as well. And then we'll wrap around to the next week. So, thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
What?
If you aren't paying attention, you're also in every other Sunday campaign that is VOD on Twitch.
Yeah. You can watch twitch.tv/TT2KB. That's a number 2. I'm currently in a Zweihander tabletop game every other Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Playing with tabletop to keyboard. So that's not on this channel, but on their channel. And that won't be this coming Sunday, but that will be the next one because we just did one this past Sunday. So if you want to go check that out on their channel, again, that's twitch.tv/TT2KB. But that's it for us this week. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode 21.
About something.
It'll be about something. And just remember, if it's your friend who was supposed to be out today, it's probably not a mimic. Good night, everybody.
Good night.